The great assembly hall on Nexus Prime stretched for kilometers in every direction. Representatives from 700 different species filled the vast space, their voices creating a symphony of clicks, chirps, harmonics, and electronic pulses that the universal translators struggled to process. Ambassador Zethkar of the Hegemony stood at the center podium, his four arms gesturing gracefully as he addressed the gathered delegates. "My fellow beings," his voice resonated through the translation matrix, "today marks the end of 3 centuries of conflict. Today we choose peace over war, diplomacy over destruction." The Vardaxian delegate, her crystalline form shimmering with approval, pulsed a gentle blue. The Thraxi contingent buzzed in harmonious agreement, their insectoid mandibles clicking rhythmically. Even the notoriously aggressive Krone had sent representatives, their massive forms surprisingly still as they listened. Zethkar continued, "The galactic accords we sign today will ensure that no species need ever fear extinction again. Our resources will be shared, our technologies combined, our cultures celebrated. The age of expansion wars is over." Commander Veltar of the Cosmic Defense Initiative leaned forward in his observation booth. The scarred veteran had seen too many battles, lost too many friends to the endless cycle of territorial disputes and resource conflicts. His cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on the ceremonial documents being prepared for signing. "Hard to believe it's really happening," muttered his aide, Lieutenant Crix. 300 years of fighting, and it all ends with signatures on fancy paper." "Not just any paper," Veltar replied. "Those accords represent the collective will of every major civilization in known space. Every trade route, every mining operation, every colonial expansion, all of it regulated by mutual agreement. No more surprise attacks. No more worlds burned to ash over mineral rights." Down on the assembly floor, the ethereal collective's representative floated serenely, their energy-based form casting dancing shadows on the walls. They had been instrumental in drafting the accords, using their advanced diplomatic protocols to find common ground between species that had been enemies for generations. The Hegemony's military advisor, General Thox, stood beside Zethkar. His species had evolved from predators, and every instinct screamed that this peace was too good to be true. But the mathematics were undeniable. The last war had cost 40 billion lives across 12 star systems. The economic projections showed that continued conflict would bankrupt even the wealthiest civilizations within 50 cycles. "The resource allocation tables have been approved," announced the Zenthari economist, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence as she reviewed the data streams. "Mining rights to the Outer Rim sectors will rotate every 10 standard years. No single species may claim more than 15% of any system's total output." The Drakmari war chiefs shifted uncomfortably. Their entire culture was built around conquest and territorial expansion, but even they had to admit that their fleets were exhausted. Their warrior caste decimated by decades of battles against increasingly sophisticated defenses. "What about enforcement?" growled the lead Drakmari representative, his scaled hide bearing the ritual scars of countless campaigns. "Words on paper mean nothing if there is no strength behind them." Zethkar nodded respectfully. "The Galactic Peacekeeping Force will be established immediately upon ratification. Each member species will contribute ships and personnel according to their capabilities. No single civilization will dominate the force. It will be truly collective." The debate had raged for months. The Vorthan Empire wanted guaranteed access to rare crystal deposits in the Sigma Quadrant. The Silicon Collective demanded protection for their mechanical offspring, who were often targeted for their valuable components. The Aquatic Depths Council required assurance that water-rich worlds would not be strip-mined for industrial purposes. One by one, compromises had been reached. The Galactic Resource Management Protocol ensured fair distribution. The species protection clauses guaranteed that no civilization would be forced into extinction through economic manipulation. The Cultural Preservation Acts protected unique traditions and ways of life. Dr. Kalison, the renowned xenobiologist who had spent her career studying interspecies relations, watched from the Scientific Observer section. Her research had been crucial in identifying the psychological and social factors that led to galactic conflicts. According to her models, the Accords had a 93% probability of success, assuming all signatories acted in good faith. The fear response is finally being overridden by logical self-interest, she had explained to the committee months earlier. When the cost of war exceeds the potential benefits, even the most aggressive species will choose peace. The signing ceremony was scheduled to begin in 1 solar hour. Representatives checked and double-checked their translation matrices. The holographic displays showed real-time feeds from thousands of worlds, where billions of beings watched the historic proceedings. On the pleasure world of Hedonia, casino patrons paused their games to watch. The odds on successful ratification had been dropping steadily as more species committed to the Accords. The bookmakers were already calculating payouts for what many considered the safest bet in galactic history. In the war-torn frontier sectors, exhausted soldiers on both sides of active conflicts had agreed to temporary ceasefires to witness the signing. Many hadn't seen their homeworlds in years, fighting over barren rocks and gas giants for resources that would soon be allocated fairly under the new system. The economic implications were staggering. The Merchant Guild had already begun restructuring their operations to take advantage of the new trade regulations. Commodity prices were stabilizing for the first time in generations. The old system of armed convoys and military escorts would be replaced by civilian transports protected by the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. "Signal from the outer perimeter," announced the communications officer in the Space Traffic Control Center orbiting Nexus Prime. "All scheduled arrivals have checked in. The Andromedans just transmitted their final approval codes. We're showing green across the board." The Andromedan delegation had been the last holdouts, their rigid honor codes making compromise difficult. But even they had eventually agreed that the alternative, mutual annihilation, served no one's interests. As the ceremony hour approached, the energy in the Great Hall became electric. Translators fine-tuned their equipment. Security forces made final sweeps of the facility. The ceremonial pens, each crafted from materials sacred to different species, were arranged on the signing podium. Ambassador Zethkar took a moment to review his notes one last time. The speech he was about to give would be broadcast to every inhabited system in known space. History would judge these words and the actions that followed. "My friends," he would say, "today we prove that intelligence can triumph over instinct, that cooperation can overcome competition, that the vast darkness between stars need not divide us, but can unite us in common purpose." The countdown reached its final minutes. The first human ship dropped out of hyperspace 3 astronomical units from Nexus Prime with all the subtlety of a supernova. The massive dreadnought materialized in a burst of exotic energy that sent gravitational waves rippling across the system, causing every sensor array within a light hour to scream warnings. "What in the name of the void was that?" Commander Veltar barked as alarms began blaring throughout the space station. His cybernetic eye was cycling through different spectrums, trying to make sense of the readings flooding his displays. Lieutenant Crix's mandibles clicked frantically as she worked her console. "Sir, we're reading an energy signature unlike anything in our databases. The ship just appeared. No hyperspace tunnel, no dimensional rift. It just materialized." On the assembly floor below, the signing ceremony had come to an abrupt halt. The universal translators were struggling to process the sudden cacophony of panicked voices from 700 different species. Ambassador Zethkar raised all 4 arms, trying to restore order. "Delegates, please remain calm," he announced. though his own voice carried a tremor of uncertainty. "Our security forces are investigating the disturbance. There is no immediate threat to this assembly." But even as he spoke, more ships began appearing, not one or two, but dozens, then hundreds. The human fleet materialized in perfect formation, each vessel the size of a small city, bristling with weapon arrays that defied conventional understanding of military architecture. Dr. Kayla-sen stared at her portable scanner in disbelief. "The metal composition? I've never seen alloys like these, and the energy output readings are impossible. A single one of those ships is generating more power than our entire defense grid." The lead human vessel, a kilometer-long behemoth designated UNE Indomitable, began broadcasting on all frequencies simultaneously. But it wasn't using any known communication protocol. Instead, the message came through in perfectly translated galactic standard, as if the humans had been monitoring their communications for years. "Attention, inhabitants of Nexus Prime. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Nations Earth Fleet. We come seeking an immediate audience with your governing body. Prepare to receive our diplomatic vessel." The silence that followed was deafening. 700 species, many of whom had been enemies for centuries, found themselves united in a single emotion, confusion mixed with a growing sense of dread. "Earth Fleet?" Veltar muttered, accessing the galactic databases. "I've never heard of Earth. Crix, run a full-spectrum analysis on those ships. I want to know what we're dealing with." General Thox had abandoned all pretense of diplomatic protocol. His predator instincts were screaming danger, and 3 centuries of military experience had taught him to trust those instincts. "How did they even find us?" "Nexus Prime's location is classified beyond the highest security clearances." The answer came from an unexpected source. The ethereal collective's representative suddenly pulsed a brilliant amber, a color none of the other delegates had seen from their energy-based forms before. "We sense something familiar yet foreign," the ethereal communicated through the translation matrix. "These beings, they think like us, but differently. Their minds burn with purpose, but it is not the purpose of peace." As if responding to the growing tension, the human diplomatic shuttle launched from the Indomitable. But shuttle was perhaps the wrong word. The vessel was larger than most species battle cruisers, and it moved with impossible grace despite its size. The shuttle's approach vector ignored all traffic control directives. It simply carved through the orbital defenses as if they weren't there, its hull shimmering with some kind of protective field that made targeting sensors slide away like water off metal. "They're not requesting permission to dock," the traffic controller reported, his voice tight with professional disbelief. "They're just coming aboard. Bay 7 Alpha is showing a forced docking procedure in progress." Inside the great assembly hall, panic was beginning to set in among some of the more nervous species. The Flexari delegates were already activating their personal defense fields, while the Kron representatives had begun the ritual battle preparations of their warrior caste, but it was the Drakmari war chiefs who reacted most strongly. Their scaled hides began shifting to combat coloration as they accessed their internal weapon systems. "Unknown fleet. This is War Chief Grakthor of the Drakmari Hegemony," the largest of them growled into his communicator. "Your presence here violates 17 separate galactic treaties. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The response came not from Admiral Chen, but from someone else entirely. The voice was younger, female, and carried an edge that made even the battle-hardened Drakmari take an involuntary step backward. "This is Colonel Jessica Rodriguez, United Nations Marine Corps. War Chief Grakthor. Your threat has been noted and filed under Adorable. Stand down your weapons, or we will demonstrate why humanity didn't survive to reach the stars by being polite." The translation matrix struggled with several human concepts that had no galactic equivalent, but the message was clear enough. The Drakmari war chiefs looked at each other in confusion. In their culture, such casual dismissal of a death threat was unthinkable. The human diplomatic party arrived in the assembly hall 15 minutes later. They moved with the confidence of apex predators who had never encountered anything they couldn't overcome. Admiral Chen led the group, flanked by Colonel Rodriguez and a man introduced as Dr. Marcus Webb, Director of Xenological Affairs. What struck the assembled delegates immediately was how similar humans looked to several other species, yet how different they carried themselves. They walked upright like the hegemony species, but with a predatory grace that reminded everyone of the Drakmari. Their faces were mobile and expressive like the Zinthari, but their eyes held a calculating intelligence that was unsettling in its intensity. "Honored delegates," Admiral Chen began, her voice carrying easily across the vast hall without amplification. "We apologize for the dramatic entrance, but we felt it necessary to ensure we had your complete attention." Ambassador Zethkar stepped forward, his diplomatic training overriding his growing alarm. "Admiral Chen, welcome to Nexus Prime. I am Ambassador Zethkar of the Galactic Hegemony. We were not aware that your species had achieved interstellar capability. When did humanity first venture beyond your home system?" "Last Tuesday," Dr. Webb replied with a slight smile that somehow made several species' survival instincts activate simultaneously. The pause that followed was pregnant with implications. Last Tuesday. These beings had developed faster than light travel less than a standard week ago, yet they had already built a fleet capable of crossing galactic distances and arriving at the most heavily defended location in known space. "That's impossible," Dr. Kalison whispered from her observation post. "The technological progression curves don't support such rapid advancement. It takes centuries to develop reliable FTL capabilities." Colonel Rodriguez overheard and turned her attention to the xenobiologist. "Dr. Kalison, isn't it? We've read your research on interspecies conflict patterns. Fascinating work, though your conclusions about human behavior are somewhat incomplete." "You've read my research?" Dr. Collison stammered. "How? My work has never been transmitted beyond the inner council networks." "We've been listening for quite some time," Admiral Chen explained. "Your species are remarkably chatty, once we figured out how to decode your communication protocols. We've learned a great deal about your situation." The word situation seemed to carry weight that the translation matrix couldn't quite capture. The assembled delegates began to realize that humanity hadn't just stumbled onto the galactic stage. They had been watching, learning, preparing. "The accords you're signing today," Dr. Webb continued, pulling out a datapad that was clearly of human manufacture, "are quite impressive in scope. Resource allocation treaties, territorial boundaries, peacekeeping forces, very civilized, very rational." "Yes," Zethkar replied cautiously. "We believe this agreement represents the best hope for lasting peace in our galaxy." Admiral Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Peace is admirable, but you've made one critical error in your calculations." "And what would that be?" General Thox demanded, his predator instincts fully engaged. Colonel Rodriguez answered with that same unsettling smile. "You assumed you were the only ones with a say in how this galaxy is organized." The implications hit the assembly like a physical blow. 700 species, quadrillions of beings across millions of worlds, and they had all made the same fundamental mistake. They had divided up the galaxy among themselves without considering that someone else might have different ideas. "What exactly are you proposing?" The ethereal collective's representative pulsed, their energy form flickering with patterns that suggested deep concern. Dr. Webb activated his datapad, and holographic displays appeared throughout the assembly hall showing detailed maps of human space. What they revealed sent a chill through every delegate present. Humanity didn't occupy a few scattered systems. The chaos in the Great Assembly Hall continued for exactly 7 minutes and 33 seconds before Admiral Chen raised her hand. The simple gesture somehow commanded more attention than all the sophisticated translation matrices and amplification systems combined. The effect was immediate and unsettling, 700 species falling silent at the will of a single human. "Thank you," she said with perfect politeness. "Now, let's discuss the terms of integration." War Chief Grak-Thor of the Drakmari stepped forward, his combat scales fully extended. In his culture, backing down from a challenge meant death with dishonor. "You speak of terms as if we have already surrendered. The Drakmari hegemony has never yielded to any force in the galaxy." Colonel Rodriguez consulted her datapad with casual indifference. "The Drakmari hegemony. Population approximately 47 billion across 12 star systems. Primary military assets include, let's see, 47,000 battle cruisers of various classes, 18 orbital fortress platforms, and one experimental planet killer that you've been building in the Korvax system for the past 18 years. The silence that followed was profound. The Korvax project was classified beyond the highest levels of Drakmari military intelligence. Yet this human was reading details from a datapad as casually as a shopping list. "How do you know about Korvax?" General Thox demanded, his own military training recognizing the implications. If humans had intelligence on the Drakmari's most secret weapons project, they likely knew everything about everyone. Dr. Webb answered with that same unnervingly pleasant smile. "We know about Korvax because we've been inside your computer system since you started the project. We've been inside everyone's computer systems. We know about the Zenthari's illegal genetic experiments, the hegemony's secret slave colonies, the Vorthon Empire's plan to assassinate the Ethereal Collective's leadership, and the Silicon Collective's programming to eventually exterminate all organic life." Each revelation hit like a physical blow. Species that had spent centuries perfecting their deception, maintaining careful diplomatic facades, suddenly found their deepest secrets laid bare. The assembly began to fracture as delegates turned suspicious eyes on each other. "This is impossible," Dr. Callison protested from her observation post. "The security protocols alone. Some of those systems are completely isolated from external networks." "Dr. Webb," Admiral Chen said, "would you care to explain our approach to information gathering?" The Director of Xenological Affairs stepped forward, his expression taking on the enthusiasm of a teacher addressing particularly slow students. "You see, when humanity developed FTL technology, we didn't do it the way you did. You all focused on making ships go fast. We focused on making time go slow." The translation matrices struggled with the concept, but the Ethereal Collective understood immediately. Their energy form pulsed a deep crimson of alarm. "Temporal manipulation," they communicated. "They've been observing us across multiple timelines simultaneously." "Correct," Dr. Webb confirmed. "While you've been having this delightful peace conference, human reconnaissance teams have been conducting detailed intelligence operations across the past 50 years of galactic history. We know every secret, every plan, every weakness. We've had decades to study you while you've had 47 minutes to study us." The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just achieved FTL travel, they had achieved something far more dangerous. They could move through time itself, gathering intelligence and planning their moves with perfect information about their opponents. Commander Veltar finally found his voice. "What do you want from us?" Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly, becoming almost maternal. "What we want, Commander, is very simple. We want you to survive." The unexpected answer sent ripples of confusion through the assembly. Ambassador Zethkar stepped forward cautiously. "Survive? Are you threatening us?" "Not us," Colonel Rodriguez replied, checking her chronometer. "But in approximately 6 hours and 14 minutes, a Devorer scout fleet is going to emerge from dark space at the edge of this system. In 18 standard days, their main invasion force will arrive. Current projections show complete galactic extinction within 3 standard months. The word devourer meant nothing to the galactic databases, but the way the humans said it made every survival instinct in the assembly hall activate simultaneously. "What are devouvers?" the Zenthari economist asked, her 4 eyes blinking in rapid sequence, a sign of extreme stress in her species. Dr. Webb activated his datapad again, and new holographic displays materialized throughout the hall. What they showed defied comprehension. Ships the size of small moons, moving in perfect formation through the void between galaxies. The energy readings were off any known scale. "The devouvers are what happens when a species achieves perfect unity," he explained clinically. "No individual thought, no personal desires, no cultural differences, just pure collective intelligence focused on a single goal, consuming all other forms of consciousness in the universe." The displays showed planet after planet being systematically stripped of all life, their surfaces converted into geometric patterns of incomprehensible purpose. Entire star systems were being disassembled and restructured into massive computational matrices. "They're not evil," Admiral Chen continued. "Evil implies choice. They simply view individual consciousness as an inefficient use of universal resources. They're coming here to correct that inefficiency." "How do you know this?" General Thox demanded. "How can you possibly know what's coming from outside our galaxy?" "Because we've fought them before," Colonel Rodriguez replied quietly. "In 17 different timelines, we've watched them destroy everything you've spent millennia building. We've seen your species fall one by one, no matter how hard you fight." The great assembly hall had become tomb quiet. 700 species, each convinced of their own strength and sophistication, suddenly felt very small and very vulnerable. "What happened in those other timelines?" Dr. Kalison asked, though part of her clearly didn't want to know the answer. "In Timeline Alpha, we tried diplomacy," Dr. Webb recounted. "The galaxy united under your accords, presented a peaceful front, attempted communication. The devouvers processed every sentient being into raw computational material within 6 weeks. In Timeline Beta, we tried hiding," Admiral Chen continued. "Species scattered to the far reaches of the galaxy, built secret colonies, hoped to wait them out. The devouvers systematically hunted down every last outpost. Extinction in 4 months. Timeline Gamma through Timeline Pi attempted various military solutions," Colonel Rodriguez added. "Massive fleet engagements, fortress worlds, even the use of planet-killer weapons. Best result was Eta, where organized resistance lasted 8 months before total collapse." The Drakmari war chiefs exchanged looks of growing horror. Their entire culture was built around the assumption that any threat could be defeated through superior firepower and tactical brilliance. The idea of an enemy that couldn't be fought was antithetical to everything they believed. "So, what's different about this timeline?" Ambassador Zethkar asked, though his voice suggested he already suspected the answer. "This timeline," Admiral Chen said with quiet certainty, "is the one where humanity doesn't try to save everyone through noble sacrifice. This is the timeline where we do what humans do best." "Which is?" The ethereal collective pulsed. Colonel Rodriguez smiled, and for the first time it wasn't unsettling. It was absolutely terrifying. "We cheat." Dr. Webb activated his datapad one final time. The holographic displays now showed detailed tactical plans, weapons specifications, and strategic deployments that made the assembled delegates' most advanced military thinking look like children's games. "The human fleet you see outside represents exactly 0.03% of our actual military capability," Admiral Chen explained. "We've been building up our forces across multiple timelines for the equivalent of 200 years. We know exactly when the devouvers will arrive, exactly what they'll do, and exactly how to stop them." "But we can't do it alone," Dr. Webb continued. "We need your resources, your manufacturing capability, your unique biological and technological advantages, the Zenthari economic models, the Drakmari warrior instincts, the Ethereal Collective's computational abilities, the Silicon Collective's manufacturing precision. We need all of it. What you're describing isn't integration, General Thox realized. It's conscription. Call it whatever makes you comfortable, Colonel Rodriguez replied. But understand this. In 6 hours, that scout fleet arrives. When it does, you have exactly 2 choices. You can maintain your independence and face extinction, or you can join the human war machine and live to see tomorrow. The great assembly hall erupted into frantic discussion as delegates huddled in species-specific groups, weighing impossible choices. But Admiral Chen wasn't finished. "One more thing," she announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. "The Devourer scout fleet, they're not coming to gather intelligence. They're coming because they detected the energy signature of this peace conference. Apparently, large gatherings of diverse consciousness types are considered priority targets for immediate processing." Ambassador Zethkar felt his 4 hearts skip a beat. "You're saying our attempt at peace is what attracted them?" "Ironic, isn't it?" Dr. Webb observed. "Your noble effort to end galactic conflict may have just triggered the end of galactic civilization. Unless, of course, you'd like to reconsider our offer of integration." As if summoned by his words, alarms began blaring throughout Nexus Prime. Long-range sensors had detected massive energy signatures at the edge of the system, signatures that matched nothing in any known database. The Devourer scouts had arrived 18 minutes ahead of human predictions. Admiral Chen checked her chronometer and sighed. "Well, so much for our carefully planned presentation. Colonel Rodriguez, please signal the fleet. It appears we're moving to Phase 2 ahead of schedule." "With pleasure, Admiral." The last thing the assembled delegates saw before the emergency evacuation protocols activated was Colonel Rodriguez's smile. It was the smile of someone who had been looking forward to this moment for a very long time. Outside, the human fleet began to unfold like a metal flower, revealing weapons systems that made the combined military might of 700 species look like antique curiosities. The age of galactic peace was over before it had truly begun. The age of human dominance had just started. On the galactic rim, as everyone had assumed, they controlled hundreds of star systems in a perfect sphere of influence that had gone completely undetected by galactic intelligence networks. Worse, their territory included some of the richest resource deposits in known space, deposits that the Accords had just allocated to other species. "Ladies, gentlemen, and other distinguished beings," Admiral Chen announced, "we're not here to join your galactic community. We're here to inform you that you're joining ours." The great assembly hall erupted into chaos. 700 species began talking at once, their voices creating a storm of outrage, confusion, and growing fear that the universal translators simply gave up trying to process. But through it all, the humans stood perfectly still, waiting with the patience of apex predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run. The age of galactic peace had lasted exactly 47 minutes. Even 100 species representing quadrillions of sentient beings across millions of worlds were about to commit to the most ambitious peace agreement in galactic history. The war fleets would be converted to exploration vessels. The fortress worlds would become cultural exchange centers. The weapon factories would retool to produce medical supplies and terraforming equipment. It was perfect. It was rational. It was the inevitable result of civilized beings choosing logic over violence. None of them knew that in a small, unremarkable star system called Sol, a species called humanity had just developed faster-than-light travel. None of them knew that these humans had a very different idea about how the galaxy should be organized. And absolutely none of them knew that the human fleet was already on its way to Nexus Prime, armed with weapons that would make the last 3 centuries of warfare look like children's games. The signing was about to begin when the first energy signatures appeared on the long-range sensors. but they were dismissed as background cosmic radiation. After all, who would be foolish enough to disrupt the most important diplomatic event in galactic history?